Hi Anton, sorry that I had to give out this video profile until a later delay, but unfortunately it's because I was struggling with microphone issues, so also I couldn't use the microphone when presenting, so that didn't really work, so hopefully that this video is okay to show you. So for my Australian film practitioner, I'll be discussing about Tony Ayers. Next, so this is just the table of contents. So I'll be covering through his background and history, his summarized timeline, films and collaborators, some of the critical reviews he's have received from the past, the box office and some related film achievements, and some video reference links which I've already attached, and I've included my list of references that are still relevant to the research that I've accumulated. Yep. So about his background and history, Tony Ayers he's considered an award-winning showrunner, a director, including a screenwriter and a producer. He's also one of the 5 co-founding members from Matchbox Pictures Company. It's a well-known Australian production company, which hopefully you're familiar with, but they're pretty much very famous for producing very international films, which eventually won many awards through festivals. He was born in Macau, China in 1961 with his older sister Linda and his single mother. Tony, he never really mentioned his mother's name, but he only mentioned his mother in the third person. So despite that, back in China, his mother worked as a nightclub hostess and singer, which she catches the ferry when traveling for work within Hong Kong prior to around the 1960s. So unfortunately, Tony, he never really knew about his biological father. So during that time, she was considered very hardworking. She would usually have to catch the ferry to travel to work. So in order to financially support her children, meaning Tony and his sister. So during the early 1960s, Tony's mother married a sailor that was visiting from Australia. His name was William Ayers. He migrated, which in turn Tony's family, his mother, sister, and him included, they migrated into Williams's hometown, which is Perth, Western Australia. But over time, it eventually led to a distant relationship. It's because of his stepfather's busy work, often at sea. His stepfather was actually considered a sailor, which he often works during that time at sea. And so Tony and his mother and sister, they rarely see him, often at home. Tony and his family, they were considered first-generation Chinese immigrants. They were constantly moving around and living in poor living circumstances. For instance, they were living around the restaurant's storeroom, like there was sleeping nearby containers in very shabby, poor living conditions. But back then, they honestly didn't have a choice because they were struggling financially. So after Tony's 11th birthday, unfortunately, his mother committed suicide, which I presume her name is Joan. She passed away in 1972. Tony graduated from the Australian National University. He gained educational experiences in literature, photography, and printmaking, and then later film studies at Swinburne and AFTRS, which was a prestigious film school. Okay, next. Okay, so this is just a summary of his biographic timeline. So Tony's his personal childhood history into adulthood. It included film productions, genres, his regular collaborators, his box office successes, and other related achievements in the film and television industry. So in general, I already discussed that in 1961, he was born in Macau, China, with an older sister and single mother. No father was ever known. In 1964, his mother married an Australian sailor, William George Ayers. So, sorry, there was just a typo. Tony never really mentioned his mother's name. It's not actually Rose. And then migrated to Perth, Western Australian home. In 1972, Tony's mother passed away. She left him and his sister homeless, and eventually he was cared by his history teacher on later. In 1989, he actually received an AFTRS script writing certificate called the Hector Crawford Award. So as best known as the producer, including editor at the Australian Writers Guild. In 2008, he co-founded a film and television production company, which I discussed, known as Matchbox Pictures, including 5 other co-founding members. And previously, back in 2018, he established his own production company called Tony Ayers Productions, or known in short TAP, with financial support from Matchbox Pictures and NBC Universal Media Studios. So his film productions and collaborators was actually the Home Songs and Stories, released in 2007, pretty much reflects Tony's childhood and Chinese immigrants that struggles living in Australia. So Linda Kwok, his sister, worked as a consultant alongside him to directing this second feature film. It left such a significant emotional impact towards audiences. His first feature film, Walking on Water, released in 2002, it explores friendship and complications of death. It was written by Roger Monks, that premiered at the Berlin and Adelaide International Film Festivals. It actually won several range of awards. His longtime gay partner, Michael Mahan, worked alongside Tony through their production companies such as Big Little Films and Matchbox. So Tony actually collaborated with Chinese-Australian filmmaker and screenwriter, his name was Ben Law, in his series, the Family Law television series, and a photographer named Yang's documentary Sadness. So he also worked with producer Andrea Denholm to deliver international films through his Tony Ayers Productions film company. So generally, majority of his personal films that relate to his troubled Asian childhood, also exploring sexual, cultural identity, and family tragedy. His body of work progressed to foretelling stories from underrepresented communities. So, for example, this involves the Asians, the Indians, including the Muslims and those from the LGBTIQ community, which is honestly inspiring. He actually left a long-lasting impact towards the audience, not only locally in Australia, but also internationally. So some of his critical reviews, The Homesome Stories from 2007, it received very positive reviews for his nuanced portrayal of the general migrant experience living in Australia, exploring central themes such as family, cultural identity, and tragedy. An autobiographical film was based through his personal true story. It was actually praised for his authentic performances and visual evocative style, and some critics pretty much described it as a dazzling piece of work. There are strong ideas like immigration, mental illness, and dynamic family relationships that helps to capture that strong resonance. Despite receiving so many awards and positive reviews, Tony felt that this film, it honestly lacked the ability to reach out a much wider audience on an international scale. In other words, he believed that international audiences outside of Australia, they didn't have the chance to see it when he directed towards this television career. In 100% Rotten Tomatoes, it was an average rating, 7 out of 10 stars. And there's this other feature film that he made called Cut Snake, released in 2014. So according to the Sydney Morning Herald, he described this third feature film as enormously rewarding for adventurous viewers. It actually appealed more towards those familiar with macho gangster stories. So there was mixed receptions. So some critics, they claimed that this film, it actually was interesting, that fits the Australian crime genre, although some just felt that it was too esoteric for not resonating the mainstream audiences. So this associates with complex themes like domestic violence, sexual identity, thus dissociating audiences with this sensitivity. So despite this third feature film receives positive audience reception for his recurring theme for diversity and complex relationships. It's due to that emotional depth and establishing that 1970s aesthetics. So Rotten Tomatoes, it grossed at a total of $1,600, includes the United States and Canadian box office revenue. It actually earned a whopping 70% average approval rating. So it wasn't technically like above like 80 or 90, but it just received an average rating by audiences. So his box office and achievements, his feature film, it unfortunately hasn't been considered as a major box office success in the conventional sense, but Tony, despite that, it's gained so many positive receptions from Australia and outside of Australia. Therefore, it received several range of prestigious film awards. So his first directing feature film, Walking on Water, grossed over $350K, so $1,000 in Australia. It actually allowed him to win the Teddy Award at the Berlin International Film Festival with 5 AFI awards. It includes Best Film, the director, lead actor, lead actress, and original screenplay. So I'm not gonna read what his home story is, but in general, moving forward to the screen industry, his body of work consistently still receives praise for his unique storytelling and acting. So both of these feature films, they premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, received positive receptions. So Mr. Ayers' 30-film career, so in general, he's achieved over 100 Australian international awards, such as the International Emmy, British Academy Film and TV, Golden Horse, known as the Asian Oscars, 6 Australian Academy of Cinema and Television Arts Awards, and 6 Logies. So he's now, at the moment, successfully running his own production company, creating films for global audiences. So recently, in May 16, 2023, Tony had the honor of being commemorated with a Doctor of Arts, Film and Television honorary degree from AFTRS. From the AFTRS staff, they mentioned that it was the inspiration. Through Tony's quote, he mentioned that it was the inspiration and guidance of key teachers that which set me on this course that sees me still in this industry 34 years later. So these are just some of the video references and appendix. I'm actually not going to go through them all, but they've chosen these 4 main video links because they pretty much described his full biographical history and from his childhood through his teenage years to his late adult years. Also explores his filmography, and I've also included the archival material, which I think is actually useful while researching more about him. It actually explores some of his international film awards and his accomplishments in a much deeper aspects. So I highly recommend that you actually check these videos out, including this archive material. And yeah, this is just some of the links, so these website links that I've accumulated and attached as I've researched from the website. So I pretty much researched his awards and from his childhood past, Tony's filmmaking success, and pretty much his career up to this point. So yeah, I pretty much just referenced them in APA reference, so hopefully there's enough evidence to sum up his background and history, and including his filmography. And yeah, thank you so much for listening, Anton. Unfortunately, I tried presenting this through PowerPoint, but for some reason my camera and microphone, they kept glitching, and so yeah, it just doesn't really want to work with me, unfortunately. But I hope that this video profile will do, and I hope you actually gain a much better understanding about Tony Ayers. Again, thank you so much for listening, and yeah, thank you in general.